And we are live with today's pre-show. It is today's 2/20/11/02 A+ study group. Hey, everybody. Hey, chat room. Let's see if I can adjust headphones. That sounds pretty good. I'm looking at cameras. Those look good. We've got recordings going here. That looks good. I think we're in pretty good shape here. Well, we just did a live stream 2 days ago. For those of you that joined us over the weekend, that was kind of fun with Core 1. We haven't done a weekend live stream in quite some time, so it was kind of nice to do that. So now it's the week. Now we're back to Monday through Friday. In this case, Monday is our study group this week. Kind of an odd schedule this month, but thanks for hanging in there. Hello, Canada. Thanks for being here, Alberta. Dubai is checked in. Newport News, Virginia. Bay Area is here. Good morning. Early morning for you. Thanks for checking in. There's Tampa and Maryland. Tampa, we got some Florida folks checking in. Thanks for being here. Off Dale Mabry. Off the St. Pete area. Off the Bay. Oh, boy. A lot going on. Hello, New York City. I think I've heard of that. There's L.A. Thanks for checking in. A lot of folks West Coast. Thanks for being here. Hello, Portsmouth, Virginia, and Texas, and Miami, and Virginia, and Maryland, and Texas, and South Africa, and Nepal. Lots of folks checking in. Thanks for being here. We've got all 2/20/11/02 questions coming up the top of the hour. I've still got another, eight minutes or so left. We'll get going there. And what else is going on? I think that's the real, I don't actually remember the questions, though. I wrote them last week sometime. So we're going to see, actually, it's a combination. Some of these questions were written a month ago. Some of these questions were written last week. So I don't remember any of them, as it turns out. Hello, Maryland and Oklahoma, Tallahassee. I've heard of that place. Hello, Mexico and Uganda and London and Chicago and Indianapolis, Indiana, Atlanta, Georgia. NYC, I think that stands for New York City. Hello, Tacoma and Saudi Arabia and Miami. A lot of folks in Miami on 826, the big curve. We got Titusville, Nigeria. We've got a lot going on here. Hey, Malk, thanks for being here. Yeah, I snuck one in on you on Saturday, didn't I? So you got it early today. Thanks for being here in St. Vincent. I know, I sort of, everything was a little bit scrambled. And even the rest of the month is still scrambled. There's like a week, and now we do another couple. And my schedule is quite interesting this month. I'm not sure what's going on. I need a whole month just to recover from whatever it is going on. In a moment, we'll get going. Right now, it's really just me figuring out if everything is working. Top of the hour, we get things started. So this is more of the pre-show where we just sort of hang out. Metronet, no plans for Metronet at the moment. I think they're probably putting in fiber close to me, but I'm already getting 1 gig down. So, and more than enough up. I don't have a lot of this is the biggest upstream requirement for me, which is, how much are we doing bandwidth rate? About 6 megabits per second on a 1080p stream here. That's a higher resolution 1080p, very little compression. And so that's working fine. So maybe I can move this. There we go. Move this around. Nope, that's not going to work. But it's about 6 megabits per second is what we are sending. So I don't need anything else other than that. We're good. Because I think my upload speed is around 35 megabits per second. But I'm hardly ever doing anything else on the upload side. So right now, I'm fine with what I got. Right now, it's Comcast has been, or I guess Xfinity has been pretty good. Very rarely are there outages where I happen to be, so it works out. Works out okay. All right, we got, in the chat room, Roy says, I'm on the network unit. I'm hearing words I'm not sure I understand. You're doing it right. That is absolutely the network part of all of these exams. Networking is an entirely different language unto itself. 5-minute warning, everybody. There it is. 5-minute warning. Oh, one of the challenges, I think I've said this in other study groups, is if you're into acronyms and an entirely different language of things, Network Plus is really good at that. Network Plus does an exceptional job at being weird in the number of total acronyms. We just use acronyms all the time in networking. It's really a challenge. Oh, we're coming down to the wire too, aren't we? We're going to be retiring the 1002 here on the 20th of October. So you only have about a month or so, a month and a week or so to kind of get everything done. This is sort of the rush to the end. There will be people doing this. A number of you already skipped over to the 1102, so you're fine. You got plenty of time. You can do this at your own pace. But the October 20th date is a drop-dead date for the 1002. So I think a lot of people, indeed, if this is like any other retirement date, there will be people taking that exam on the last day it's available. So that's sort of how it goes. That's how it works. Let's see. There is, in fact, if you're into acronyms, and remember that I say this with a caveat, there is a big set of acronyms, a big glossary in the back of the A+ exam objectives. But don't just memorize acronym and name. That doesn't help you at all on the exam. In fact, that very rarely does that even matter in the world of technology, because we use terms like SSL, TLS, all of STP. You know, we say these things out loud to other people. We almost never, when's the last time I said shielded twisted pair to another IT professional? I don't know if I've ever said it, but I've said STP all the time. Is that a UDP or STP? What are we running here? And they'll say, oh, we're running UDP. No, we're running STP. So we've got options there. But we never say, are you running unshielded twisted pair or are you running shielded twisted pair? Why would I say that? So it's much faster. Is this the UTP or the STP? Which one are we running? That's the benefit of those acronyms. And it gets to a point where for the exams, you should know what the acronym means, how you would use it, how you would implement it, how it would be part of a story. Like I just said, we're implementing some cable. Do we choose the UTP or the STP? You know, even if you knew some of these acronyms, it may not necessarily help you with a question like that. So that's the important part. I think in fact, I sort of forget them after a while because we use the acronyms so much. What did that PCIe? What was the acronym? And now I have to go back into my brain and go through all of the old acronyms. It's a challenge. And that's why we just say PCI Express or PCIe. We don't go into the peripheral connect, all of the things that when we talk about acronyms and we sometimes memorize those acronyms, you need to know how you do. It does help if you know how you would use it, probably more than knowing what the actual words are associated with the acronym. Isn't that weird? It's just one of the weirdness of our industry. A minute and 10 seconds to go. We'll get started on this party. What else we got going on? I think we're good. Looking one last check. Am I in the center of the screen? I appear to be. Close enough. We'll see. We will see what we can do with this. I think we've got a good set of questions for you today. We've got lots to go through. So this will be fun. First hour is questions that I will ask. Second hour are questions that you will ask. So we've got an opportunity here as we're going through this. If there are questions you would like to talk about or things you would like to mention in the after show, make sure you write those down so that we can go through any of those. 30 seconds to go, Mr. Sinatra. Okay, I think we're in really, really good shape here. Everything appears to be running okay, but I'll, of course, keep my eye on that cache. That 3% is the number we want. When it starts getting over 3% and going up, that means our network connection is not good. So that's the one we are watching today, every day, really, to get that. It's top of the hour. Let's see if I can get my keynote up and running. Let's look for a green light. We got one. It's time for a live stream, everybody. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the September 2022 Professor Messer 220-1102 A+ study group. I'm not sure if the titles are getting longer and longer or if I'm almost not remembering all the letters and numbers. Either way, we're still good. We're in great shape. Thanks for being here on our live stream. I have questions to ask you that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. Also, in the second hour, stick around for that, where I will be taking questions from you. So we've got a couple of different places we can go with these questions today. And if there's anything you want to talk about in that second hour, make sure you write it down, make a note of it. We can always talk about all of those. If you are here live, we would love for you to be able to participate live with us, answer the questions online, lock in your answers. You can do that by popping open a new browser window and visiting this URL, professormesser.com/QA. professormesser.com/QA. There's a question waiting for you right now. If you go to that link, if you're here live. If you're not here live, unfortunately, that link is not going to work, but you can still follow along with us. So we're glad to have you here with us. There's also an app for this. Of course there is. You can go to the Socrative Student app. That's the name of the app in your favorite app store. There are a number of different Socrative apps. For example, there's a Socrative Teacher app. That's the one for me. Don't download that one. You want to download the Student app. And when you open that Student app, there will be a room name waiting for you. That room name is Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. Now, if you do all of that, there will be a question waiting for you. And if this question looks familiar, then you're probably correct in that assumption, because it is a question from last month. We call this our rewind question, just to see if you're able to get in, you're able to see the question, you're able to answer the question. I see a number of you are locking in your answers right now. For those of you that are working through this, here is the question. It asks, the DHCP server for a network is unavailable. However, the IP addressing for a laptop is providing full access to local servers and the internet. Which the following is the most likely reason for this? Is it, see if I can put this up, is it API-PA, Active Directory, 802.1x, alternate configuration, or VPN? So lock in your answer. Remember, no answers in the chat room. Remember, no hints in the chat room. You want to go to the link that's on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. That's where you want to be. We're going to come back to this question in just a moment. Think about that one, figure out what it might be, and we'll come back to this question in just a moment. Thanks for being here on our live stream. Thank you for watching on the replays. We love doing these, and we appreciate you being here and joining us for this. If you would like to see any of our training videos, of course, every video of every course is available to watch online for free. You can simply visit YouTube, go to professormesser.com/YouTube. We also have a daily A+ pop quiz question. I just posted all the questions for this week, so they're ready to be rolled out to you every day. The way you would see those is to visit us on Twitter, professormesser.com/Twitter, or if you like a pretty picture with your question, you can go to professormesser.com/Instagram, all to get a free daily pop quiz question. There are 2 A+ certification exams available right now, and you can take either set, but I will tell you about dates and times here that are going to be pretty important. Back in January of 2019, way back in the day, before we even thought that there would be global pandemics, CompTIA released these 2 exams, the 220-1001 and 220-1002. Those are the older, if you will, version of the A+ exam, but they are still valid. These exams don't retire until October the 20th, 2022. Now, obviously, October the 20th, as we sit here on September the 12th, that's about a month and a week away. That's not very long. And since it takes months to generally really sit down and learn everything you need to know for these exams, that is probably not a set of exams you would like to take if you're just getting started. I'll tell you in a moment which exams you should be using if you're just new into the world of A+ studies. Now, if you have been studying and you've already passed one of these and you're trying to pass the other one, well, then obviously you do need to continue to work towards that, and you need to make sure both of those are done by October the 20th. There are both exams you have to pass. The 1001, you have to get a 675 on a scale from 100 to 900. And for the 1002, you need a 700, just a little bit more on the same scale. Now, even if you pass both of these exams on October the 20th, although the exam is retiring, which means you won't be able to take the exams anymore, if you passed both of them, you're certified for 3 years. So you aren't losing anything by passing both of these. If anything, you're gaining 3 years of certification when that happens. That's a benefit. Now, if you're just getting started with your studies, you may instead want to look at 2 different exams. It almost looks like I didn't even change the slide here, but I absolutely did. You'll notice the numbers are different. The 220-1101 and the 220-1102. These were made available and released on April the 20th, so a few months ago, number of months ago. It's more than a few at this point. 6 months ago, 5 months ago, we have released that latest version. That's why a number of you who are here today have been studying for your 1101 and 1102, and that's why this particular study group is specifically for the 220-1102. So this is the latest set of exams. The benefit here is that if you've started studying this, these exams won't retire until November of 2025. I think that gives you enough time to finish up both of those exams. The exam requirements are exactly the same, and it doesn't matter which flavor of exams you take. You need to pass both of those exams in a single group, and you're certified for 3 years. So that part always stays the same regardless. What's important to keep in mind is both of the exams you take must be from the same edition. So you can't take the 1001 and then take the 1102. You can't mix and match those. That means that if you've already passed one of the 1101 or 1102 exams, you have to pass the other one by October the 20th, or everything gets wiped clean and you have to start over again with the 1101 and 1102 series. So that's the important part if you're thinking about that. Now, if you look at the exam objectives for both of these exams, exactly the same. Exactly the same. They kept the same domain names. They kept the same different sections within each single domain. So you've got mobile devices, networking, hardware, virtualization, and cloud computing, and hardware network troubleshooting for the 1101. And for the 1102, you have operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures, which, by the way, is exactly the same as the 1002. This is one of those where you it almost seems like it's almost identical until you start getting into the details. And then you'll notice that about 30%, maybe a little bit more, of that 1102 exam is brand new content. So don't study from old materials and think that you're going to be able to take the newer exam. You're probably not going to do very well on your exam. If you do that, make sure you always study from materials that match the version that you are taking. That is so important to have that there. Again, your scores, 675 or 700 on a scale from 100 to 900. Obviously, that's an odd scale, but what that really means is that each question is worth a different number of points. You really have no way to reverse engineer this. The only thing I can really recommend you do is to always do the best that you can. Don't worry so much about how it's graded, what the points are for a question. It doesn't matter ultimately, because you'll never know anyway. They're not going to tell you. So don't worry about the details. Just concentrate on getting as much correct on these exams as you can. We do one of these study groups for each of these training courses each month. And of course, I have a video replay available on YouTube immediately afterwards. There's also a podcast audio only version available on my site. Visit professormesser.com/podcast, and you can listen on that page or add it to your podcast listening program so it's always downloaded and available on your mobile device. On the YouTube side, as I mentioned, this YouTube video will be available for replay immediately after we are done. I hit the end button, it processes for a few minutes, and then it's available for you to watch. About a day later, my marketing manager, Lori, will go through all of this and put timestamps into the YouTube video description so you can find exactly what you're looking for. You can jump directly to a question and answer, or even some of the things in the after show. Thanks, Lori, for watching this. She's watching the replay, hopefully at 2x speed, so she can get through it as quickly as possible. And she's been doing this for years. You can go back years on these study groups and find exactly what you're looking for. Thanks so much, Lori. When we are not here doing a live stream, we are chatting in our Discord. You can find us at professormesser.com/Discord if you'd like to join. We also have buttons and links on our website in the upper right, so you can always find the Discord channel and join us there and do some chatting. We'd love to have you join us. I can't be live and online all the time, but I can easily carry around the Discord with me and answer questions you might have. There's tons of people there that can help you with your questions as well. We're all in there studying. It's a great community. You can join us at professormesser.com/Discord. Also let you know that eventually you will need to take the exam. And to take the exam, you'll need to purchase a voucher. You can do this on the Pearson VUE website, but you're paying full price. And who wants to pay full price? Let's get a discount. I've got discounted vouchers on my website. If you're in the U.S., a U.S. territory, or Canada, you can purchase those on my website at a discounted rate. You don't need a coupon code. You don't need an extension in your browser. You don't need additional software. I don't make you jump through hoops. It's just discounted. It's just all there. Go to professormesser.com/vouchers. If you purchase the voucher on my site, I also give you a free copy of my Exam Hacks ebook, which is a number of tips and tricks I found through the years that might help you get a few extra points when you're working during the exam. So this might give you some ideas on how to have the best strategy for taking the exam. Every little bit counts, and hopefully that's something that can help you as well. Find out more about these vouchers at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's talk about that question we looked at earlier. The question asked, the DHCP server for a network is unavailable. However, the IP addressing for a laptop is providing full access to local servers and the internet. Which of the following is the most likely reason for this? Is it APIPA, Active Directory, 802.1x, alternate configuration, or VPN? It's got to be one of those. Let's see how you answered this one. We aren't quite sure. 37% of you say it's APIPA. 35% of you say it's alternate configuration. Those are the two we're kind of torn. It's almost a tie for first place there, isn't it? 11% said Active Directory, 9% said 802.1x, and 9% said VPN. It's effectively a three-way tie for second place. So we're really not sure. It's either between APIPA or alternate configuration. So what we would like to do is get more information about this problem and how we would use or take advantage of the technology that we have in Windows to work around some of these issues. If you are configuring a wired connection or even a wireless connection on this link, you will absolutely find that there are many things that you can configure in your Ethernet configuration. You've probably gone into the properties before and found all of these different protocols, different settings. You can change IP address configurations. There are so much there that you could work through. In fact, if you look at the IP address configuration, you know that many times you have that obtain an IP address automatically. That's using APIPA. And if this is going directly to a DHCP server, when the DHCP server is not available, it automatically reverts to APIPA. So you're going to get some type of IP address regardless, whether it's directly from the DHCP server or whether it's one that is effectively pulled from an available link local IP address, a local pool. When you have a DHCP server that's not available and you get an APIPA assigned address, it's link local. You don't have any way to see anything outside of your local net. But you'll notice the question asked, or even said, the IP addressing for the laptop is providing full access to local servers and the internet. Well, wait a second. If we got an APIPA address, we wouldn't be able to talk to the internet. We can only communicate to local devices on our local subnet. That's why we refer to that APIPA address as a link local address, because it can't communicate outside of our local link. So how is this device able to communicate to the internet even though the DHCP server is down? Well, that's most likely because they have configured within Windows an option for an alternate configuration. And I know it's difficult to see there, so I'm going to get rid of my big head here so you can see what's going on. This says, if this computer is used on more than one network, enter the alternate IP settings below, and you can choose to either have an automatic private IP address, APIPA, or you can configure manually an IP address subnet mask default gateway. You effectively create a static IP address configuration. Now, this could be used if you use API, you use DHCP at work, and then when you go home, maybe you'd like to use a completely different set of IP addresses that have been manually configured. That's one way you can do it. But this is also something that can be used when DHCP is not available. So instead of having a link local address, which is going to limit what you're able to do, you can instead configure an alternate configuration with a user configured IP address, which now allows us access to everything. It's not just a link local address. So if you are looking at these questions and answers and you're trying to determine, is it APIPA? Well, it's not, because we're communicating to the internet. It must be an alternate configuration, because that is the only option in these 5 different available choices that would provide full access to local servers and access to the internet at the same time. It would not be Active Directory. Active Directory is a database of information commonly used to store usernames, passwords, information about computers, and to manage devices on a Windows network. Having Active Directory doesn't somehow allow you full access to local servers in the internet if a DHCP server is down. 802.1x is an authentication mechanism. This is port-based authentication. And that 802.1x is one where you would put in your username and password just to gain access to the network. Well, username and password isn't our problem. The DHCP server being unavailable is our problem. So that's not going to be the problem either. And then VPN, 8% of you said VPN. A virtual private network does allow you to communicate securely across the network to other devices. But if this was a situation where a DHCP server was unavailable, VPN was not going to work for you either unless you had configured an alternate configuration. So we're back to answer D. That is the right answer. Alternate configuration. If you chose that option, you got that one absolutely right. So hopefully this has been a reminder of things we went through last month. Hopefully you're able to get in and answer the questions that we have here. Now let's shift gears just a little bit, because I have quite a bit to go through here. I'm going to bring this back up because I'm noticing something in the slide that I would like to show you next with the question on it. I wonder if I can fix this in real time. That's why we do live streams, everybody. Let's see if I can expand out my screens so that you're able to see. It's not going to be the best. There we go. So let's give you a question now that is what I like to call, and what CompTIA calls, a performance-based question, a PBQ, as they like to say. Performance-based questions are questions that ask about configuring. Maybe they're drag and drop questions. Maybe they put you at a command prompt. Maybe they're questions that have things in a particular order from highest to lowest or fastest to slowest. There are a lot of different types of questions, but the content for the performance-based questions come directly from the exam objectives. So it's not like they're asking you something you don't know. They're just asking you in a way that's different than a multiple choice-based question. This is one that I would like to use. In fact, I'm looking for a command prompt in this one. This is almost a fill in the blank as I'm looking through this. So let's have a look at our performance-based question of the month. This question is a fill in the blank question that asks, a Windows computer has nope, it doesn't have that one. I wonder if I have a different configuration on my screen than you have on your screen. I suspect I do. So we're going to flip around a little bit and see if I can put up a different question on here. I like the one I have here. I don't think this is this is the one that I wanted, and then I put a different one in the configuration. So we're going to do Do I have both of them? I do not. Let's see if I have the questions available for you on this performance-based question. I'm trying to figure out which one I want to give you. If I want to give you the one that's posted, or if I want to give you another one that I have standing by. So let's see if this one, this is not a bad question, but it's not the one I wanted to ask. But I'm going to ask it anyway, because it's on the screen and we can look at this one. The question asked, a system administrator is evaluating a system for a possible malware infection. What should they type at a command line to verify the Windows system files are still valid? So lock in your answer. You can see a number of people locking it in right now. I like Jordan's answer. Let's do both of them. I think you're right. I think one of them, though, is a repeat from last year. You don't mind, do you? We'll just do the repeat. They're both valid for the 1102, so we'll do that. I think another way that you could look at these questions is if you are sitting in front of a command prompt and you're trying to solve this particular problem, what would you type in at the command prompt? Now, I'm not going to have a follow-up slide for this one, but that's okay. I do have for another one, and we can, of course, look through the details of that one as well. In fact, these two questions I have, I like that we will be doing both of them because they are very similar in scope. That's the only hint I'm going to give you. If you're looking to put the answer in, there's our link, professormesser.com/QA. Visit the website, lock in your answer for this one. A system administrator is evaluating a system for a possible malware infection. What should they type at the command line to verify the Windows system files are still valid? What would it be? It's got to be one of them, right? See if you can lock in. Now, I'm looking at my presentation here. I feel like the presentation I have here is not the latest. This might be a very short study group, everybody. I like that I go through the process of building that out, and then I have to figure out, well, what are we going to do next? See if you can lock in your answer, see what we've got there. In the meantime, I'm going to be clicking through a few things on my side and making sure that I have the latest study group content available for you. I do. That is the latest study group, but it is so messed up. I don't think I have the right thing on my screen. I wonder what happened there. There's always something. It's always something. But I got questions here we're going to go through. You're stuck with me either way. So we're going to really shoot through them and see what options I have on this presentation. When I started going through the details of this and trying to bring out performance-based questions, these are always a challenge because you could really be asked almost anything on the exam. So let's see how you did with this one. A system administrator is evaluating a system for a possible malware infection. Now, I'm going to quickly go back to a previous study group and see if I can find the breakdown for that particular slide. And I bet I can, because I bet it's right here. I wonder if I went through the whole thing and started working through the details of this. No, this is actually, I have two here that we're going to work with. So this is great. We'll do two for the price of one on this one. So for those of you that have locked in your question here, we're going to parse out this question to see if we can figure out what would we be typing at the command line to provide this information. A system administrator is evaluating a system for a possible malware infection. So already we can think this particular configuration on the system is questionable. If malware has been installed, almost anything could have been changed. Almost any file in the file system could have been changed. Our data files could have been changed. A lot of things might have been modified on our computer. So the question asks, what should they type at the command line to verify the Windows system files are still valid? So this, of course, should be one of the first things you think about. If you think malware is in an operating system, did it modify the operating system itself? Did it make a change to any of the important critical operating system files? And if it did, then we're going to need to correct those files. We're going to need to put the right things in place. And that is really our biggest challenge. We don't want to have this system cleaned up, and then we reboot the system, and now it's reinfected again because the operating system itself is our problem. So what we want to do is provide a different set of commands. I'm going to bring up a slide sort of ad hoc here as we go in real time. The real question you should be asking yourself is, how can I check every single file in the operating system? And then what can I do to confirm that these files are working properly? And here's the answer. We'll just slide it in here. It's SFC. It's the System File Checker. System File Checker is a way to scan all of the critical and important system files on your computer. It checks every single one associated with the OS. It goes through everything that's important to get your system up and running and make sure that no one has made any changes to those critical files, because it's obviously what malware loves to do. It loves to go in and modify the operating system so that you can't get rid of it. Well, SFC will go through all of those files. It will check, did anybody touch this file? Has this been modified since I put it on here? Yes or no. How about the next one? Has this one been modified? Yes or no. And if it finds anything that's bad, it will tell you it has found corrupt files. And in the case of the /scan now option for SFC, the System File Checker, it says it has successfully repaired them. So one time through, it scans all of those critical system files, and then it also goes through the process of fixing those critical system files. The System File Checker is what we were looking for here, SFC. And if you use the full command line, SFC/scan now is really the best answer for this one. That is the one that will look through all of the files on your system, all the critical system files on your computer, and it will verify that everything that's there is supposed to be there. And if it isn't, it'll fix them. So SFC scan now is what we were looking for. That was the one we wanted to use. And that's really important if you're getting into the details of a system that has been infected, and for some reason you just can't delete everything and start fresh. You need to get into the system and at least get it booted so maybe you can transfer some files off of it. SFC can be a real game changer. It can fix things that you may not have even thought was possible to fix. If your system constantly boots with a blue screen, going into safe mode or going into a configuration mode prior to Windows starting will allow you to get in at the command prompt and run SFC/scan now. That's a great way to do it, and that's what I would recommend that you do if you're in that situation. So I've got another. This one is from a year ago, but it is one that popped up on the system. I'm not even sure. I'm going to quickly click through something really quick here, just so I can see what the next slides are going to be. I want to confirm that I've got the right presentation in front of me as well. What is today, by the way? It's 2022, and I already have the wrong presentation up. Let's open up the 2022 view of the world, and I'm going to look through my list. No, I have a very different presentation here than what I should have in front of me. So if everybody in the chat room will bear with me just a moment, I'm going to pull up the presentation. We might just do this. No, it's the same presentation here. I don't know. It's a mystery. Let's see if I have some questions that I can ask you directly from it. I think that may be the best way we go with this one, is instead of trying to find where is that presentation, what did we do with it, how did it go away, what did we miss? Well, we're going to find out in just a moment. If you'll bear with me, I'm going to flip through a couple of presentations just to make sure that I really have the right thing in front of me. So thank you for indulging me just a moment. There's a lot to go through. What is today? Today is the 12th of September, and I'm not sure why that presentation did not update properly, but boy, it sure didn't. Do not have the right thing there. Let's look at the questions that I have. I'm going to quickly back out of this. There we go. No, I don't know what happened to those questions that I made for you after all of that work. So we're going to do some that I happen to have available. We're going to pop through to an older presentation, and I've got a few here. Yeah, we're going to catch up. There we go. Beautiful. Let's do another question. So that was our performance-based question of the month. I want to thank you for your indulgence and letting me flip through some of those others that are there. I've got more questions for you. These are brand new questions you have not seen before, and we're going to break through each one of these one at a time. So let's do one more question that I happen to have. Is everything up and running? I think it is. Here is the next question on our list, which asks, a company has replaced the batteries in all of their UPS systems. Which of the following would be the best way to dispose of these batteries? Would we ship to the battery manufacturer, place in the normal trash bin, deliver to a hazardous waste facility, donate to charity, or add to a recycle bin? A company has replaced the batteries in all of their UPS systems. Which of the following would be the best way to dispose of these batteries? Would it be ship to the battery manufacturer, place in the normal trash bin, deliver to a hazardous waste facility, donate to a charity, or add to a recycle bin? It's got to be one of those. Let's see if you know the answer. If you do, follow the link that's on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. I think I know where my updated presentation is at this point. I know exactly where it is. It's on a different computer entirely, but we're going to struggle through this one. Whenever I start getting into the details of these questions, they all come from different domains. So you'll notice we skip from one domain to another as we step through these study groups, just to give you kind of a broad approach. Instead of doing all questions on command line or all questions on security or all questions on troubleshooting, you'll notice we flip around through some of these. So hopefully that doesn't throw you off as we're going through these, which, by the way, is exactly how your exam is going to handle it. Your exam will be completely randomized with the different things that are available. So let's see how you do with this particular question. Lock it in. This is a pretty important one. You would think that disposing of batteries wouldn't be something you would be involved with. The problem, though, think of how many batteries we have in IT, how many we use, especially if we're doing UPS. If we have a UPS system, we don't just have one UPS system. We have many different UPS systems, or maybe you have a really, really large battery-based UPS system, and you would have to swap out all of those very large batteries. So the responsibility for keeping things up and running somehow also manages itself to have all of these additional batteries available. And if you've ever managed a UPS, one of the things you notice, in fact, Jesse's just mentioned this in the chat room. Jesse says, I just replaced 25 UPS batteries last month. That's because they have a shelf life. They only will stay valid or work in these UPS systems for a certain amount of time, for 2 years, for 3 years, maybe 4 years, but you're stretching it. My UPS will tell me, hey, the batteries in here, not really working so well anymore. You're going to need to swap those out. And so you'll find there will be a standard schedule you go through for swapping these batteries out. And then once you do that, what do you do with the battery? Back to the question, a company has replaced the batteries in all of their UPS systems. Which of the following would be the best way to dispose of these batteries? Would it be shipped to the battery manufacturer, place in the normal trash bin, refer to a hazardous waste facility, donate to charity, or add to a recycle bin? What do you think? 87% of you say you should deliver them to a hazardous waste facility. That's where we should go. Whenever I start going into the details of what I do with a battery, it's almost the same thing when what do I do with all of these laser printer cartridges? What do I do with all of this extra electronic equipment? Well, you shouldn't throw it in the garbage. The battery manufacturer, 11% of you said battery manufacturer is where it should be shipped to. Battery manufacturer doesn't want them. They will not accept them, and they will send them back to you. We've got 86% of you said deliver to the hazardous waste facility, and certainly that's something we should think about when dealing with toxic waste. If your batteries is a really good example of this for toxic waste. You've also got toner cartridges, as I mentioned. If you're ever wondering, what do I do with this? It's not something that sometimes is obvious. Somebody hands you an external hard drive and says, dispose of this properly. Well, I'm not even sure what I do. Fortunately, there's a materials safety sheet. We can look at the MSDS that will tell us here's the best way to dispose of this particular component. So if you're just never quite sure where you should go with it, always go back to the MSDS. That's really going to tell you exactly what to do. And it's probably going to tell you, don't put it in the garbage. Send it to your local hazardous waste facility. That's sometimes a pain. Sometimes you have to do that at the facility. You have to send it out there. You have to have a third party take it from you and move it out there. It can be a bit of a problem because often they don't pick these up. You have to take them to that facility. But it's a great way to dispose of these. It's the best way to dispose of them. And that's why in this case, C indeed was the correct answer here. We would not place them in the normal trash bin. These are hazardous materials. We don't want those chemicals getting into our groundwater, so you do not want to put them in the normal trash bin. Donating to a charity is really good. Donating to charity, that's a very funny answer if you're somebody who is ever worked with a charity before. They don't want your garbage. They don't want your used batteries. That's not going to help you either. So that's another example of you're trying to give it back to the manufacturer. You're trying to give it to a charity. Nobody wants these. They're garbage. It's useless. We need to somehow dispose of them at this point to be able to make that happen. And then lastly, add to the recycle bin. Well, they're not going to recycle these either in the recycle bin. These are indeed hazardous toxic waste. We do not want to put them in a normal garbage, a recycle bin, or anything but the hazardous waste facility. If you answered C, 86% of you got that one absolutely right. Let's see another question we have. As we know, the 220-1102 exam deals with Windows 10 and Windows 11. So let's do a Windows 10 question that asks, a Windows 10 user would like to prevent websites from accessing their language settings. Which of the following would provide this option? Is it Windows Firewall, Settings Privacy, BitLocker, NTFS, or Device Manager? A Windows 10 user would like to prevent websites from accessing the language settings in Windows 10. Which of the following would provide this option? Is it Windows Firewall, Settings Privacy, BitLocker, NTFS, or Device Manager? If you think you know the answer, go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. It's got to be one of those. Let's see how you do with your settings and getting things running from there. Lot to go through. Remember to stick around for the second hour. I'll be taking questions from the chat room. If you've got a question you would like to submit, make a note of it, put it down on a piece of paper or in a notepad or something digital so that you can come back to that in that second hour. Figure out the details. Folks in the chat room also talking about jobs and finding different jobs. A lot of people talking about sales engineering. I certainly have a lot of experience in that. We can always talk about that in the after show as well. Make a note of the questions you would like to ask, and we'll take those directly from the chat room in the second hour. These questions I'm giving you are questions I write, so these are not going to be found in the Google. Stop Googling. This is not something you will easily find anyway in the Google. If we find in the Google, that's more of a concern, I think. Now I need to do some more work on my side, if that's the case. If it's already made its way over there. Hopefully that's something we're not going to run into. Go ahead and lock in your answer. See what it happens to be. Let's see how you did with this one. A Windows 10 user would like to prevent websites from accessing the language settings. Which of the following would provide this option? Would it be Windows Firewall, Settings Privacy, BitLocker, NTFS, or Device Manager? What did you answer? Let's have a look. 80% of you, 80, say settings privacy. That is a very large number. 79% of you say that is the option. It's almost overwhelming. However, 17%, a nice double digit, said Windows Firewall is what you would use for that. And then we've got 2% that said BitLocker, 1% that said NTFS, and 1% that said Device Manager. So hardly anybody chose those three. Those three tied for third place way back. Tied for third place, almost not even important. With 79% of you saying privacy, well, if you've worked at all in Windows 10 or Windows 11, well, then absolutely it is the privacy area where you can make changes and customize just how much a third party might have access to in your operating system. This, of course, allows you to customize the type of advertising that you will see. You can share your language here or choose not to share your language. Sometimes that gives away locations, and some people don't like to give away their location. So you can disable that so that the language setting is not available to a third party. There's also things that you can change with speech recognition if you use that in your operating system. By default, Windows will send this audio to a third-party service or to themselves to be able to process that piece of it. And so you can choose whether you would like to use that speech recognition or not. All of this is in the privacy settings. You can see the list of all of those under the settings, and then you choose privacy. You've got all the options there to toggle those on and off. We look at the different options we had. Obviously, 79% of you chose settings privacy. You got that one absolutely correct. 17% of you said Windows Firewall, though. Why would it not be Windows Firewall? Windows Firewall is very good at preventing certain protocols or applications from communicating across the network. But Windows Firewall doesn't do a great job at being very granular with what those applications are doing. For example, Windows Firewall will not prevent somebody from accessing certain aspects of a configuration or an application. So it will not prevent somebody from accessing the privacy settings inside of your computer. It will also not prevent certain types of applications from running, but other aspects of that application. For example, a next generation firewall is very good at maybe allowing someone to go to Twitter, but it can prevent somebody from posting to Twitter. Well, it's still Twitter that's being used, but that firewall is very smart in how it's able to restrict and allow different features of an application. Well, Windows Firewall can't do that. Windows Firewall doesn't have that granularity. It can't enable or disable certain features of an application. So although 17% of you chose Windows Firewall, unfortunately, there's no option in there to prevent websites from accessing language settings that are built into the Windows 10 operating system. Now let's look at these last three. Hardly anybody chose those, but they're worth going through. BitLocker is a full disk encryption, or FDE. It encrypts everything that is on a drive. So all of this information that's in BitLocker will protect the data, but it doesn't prevent websites from accessing language settings within the operating system. NTFS is a file system, the next generation of file systems that have been around and keep changing. It seems NTFS gets a new N every year or two. We see new all the time. NTFS constantly upgraded. But as a file system, which is a way to categorize and have a library of all the files that are on your system, doesn't do anything with preventing websites from accessing language settings. So NTFS would not be the option. And then Device Manager, which is great for enabling or disabling the hardware that's on your system, or for adding additional hardware to your system, updating drivers for those device drivers. Fantastic utility, but doesn't do anything for preventing websites from accessing language settings. In this case, the only one that makes any sense, the only one that is a complete perfect option for what we were looking for, is answer B, settings privacy, and 79% of you got that one absolutely right. Well, we've kind of shifted into a little bit of security there. Let's keep that going just a little bit and talk about security in the form of passwords. This question asks, which of the following is the most common method of storing passwords? Is it EFS, hash, WPA3, digital signature, or asymmetric encryption? The question asks, which of the following is the most common method of storing passwords? Is it EFS, hash, WPA3, digital signature, or asymmetric encryption? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and then have a look at what the different options might be there. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We'll have to see what the different options are. All of these are security topics. They're all security techniques. So we have to figure out which one best fits for this particular question. If you think you know the answer, lock it in. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Have to see what the options are. A lot to go through. In fact, you should know every single one of these. All 5 of those answers are in the CompTIA exam objectives. So if there's any of those answers you don't recognize or you couldn't describe that technology to someone else, that's how I like to do it. Do I really know it? Well, let's see if I can explain it to somebody. That's a great way to do it. See if you know what the answer is by listing out, going through, maybe getting rid of one we know can't be the possible answer, getting all the way through and be able to figure out what this particular option might be. We'll have to figure out how we're doing with this. I'm quickly running out of questions also. Just so you're aware, quickly running out of where those might be. I'm going to bring something up on the screen here, on my screen, so I can really see what's going on. How are we doing? We're doing pretty good, though. I think we're all right. I think we'll be able to work through this study group without much of a problem. See if you can lock in your answer. See if you happen to know what this one is. This would be a good one to go through. Let's see how you answered. In fact, the question asks, which of the following is the most common method of storing passwords? Is it EFS, hash, WPA3, digital signature, and asymmetric encryption? How did you answer? Let's see what the results are. 67% of you say it is a hash. We've got 15% of you that say asymmetric encryption. And then practically a 3-way tie for third place between EFS, WPA3, and digital signature with 7%, 5%, and 7% respectively. So this is a very good question when it comes to the strategies we would use for protecting a password. Passwords are interesting things because we need to validate the password, but we don't want anyone to ever know what the password is. This is a little bit of a chicken and egg problem, isn't it? We're really struggling to figure out where we would go with a particular issue like that. How do we have a password but hide the password so that no one would ever see the password? This is our challenge. The way that we would do this, generally speaking, in the industry is by using a hash. A hash is a fixed length bit of text that is created from a different source. And in this particular case, creating them from a source such as a document, you could create a hash from a graphics file, you could create a hash from a system file that's in Windows, or you could create a hash from a password. And in fact, that's exactly what we would like to do, is have this hash. The beauty of a hash is cryptographically, you create the hash, it's a one-way trip to create this hash. And once you have the hash, there's no way to undo the hash and somehow regain the original piece of information. It's not possible. That's not what a hash does. You can think of a hash as your fingerprint. So a fingerprint definitely identifies you as an individual. We know that's the case. Everybody has a different fingerprint. So if I get a fingerprint and I looking at that fingerprint and I also get a copy of your fingerprints, I can compare those two and then I can say, oh, this is the same person. I have this fingerprint, and it's unlikely that anyone else in the world happens to have that fingerprint. I can say, this is definitely you. Same thing with a hash. A hash is effectively a digital fingerprint. And if I have a hash, I can now take a password, hash it, and then compare those two hashes to see if they're identical. That's how we're able to store passwords without actually storing the password. It's a perfect way to do this. And in fact, that's what we would use constantly. In fact, most of our password storage also includes additional randomization that we call salt. So there's additional pieces of information we would put in there to make it even more difficult to try to brute force or reverse that process. Hashing a password is a fundamental way to do this. Now, there were other options here. For example, 14% of you said, I would use asymmetric encryption. That's what I would go through, asymmetric encryption. You would never use encryption with a password. Why wouldn't you? This seems like exactly what you would use. Whenever we go to a website and use our credit card, it's encrypted. Whenever we connect through a VPN, it's encrypted. Whenever we use almost anything that we want to protect on our network, it's encrypted. So why wouldn't we use encryption for a password? Well, that's because we can reverse an encryption to come up with the original plaintext. And that's not what we would like to ever have happen with a password. You imagine an attacker gaining access to encrypted passwords, and then the attacker is also able to gain access to the keys. Well, now they can, in a matter of seconds or even less, now decrypt all of the passwords, and now you have everyone's password. That's it. That's why we don't use encryption for passwords. Very bad idea. There should never be a case where you can reverse out to the original password. It's got to be a brute force every time. That's the only way you would do this. So asymmetric encryption, although very good for certain use cases dealing with security, in fact, probably some of the best use cases with security, not a good use case for a password. Do not use asymmetric encryption or any type of encryption to protect a password. Bad idea. Bad idea. Never do that. Have developers done this in the past? Absolutely. They have. You can find developers that implement security poorly all the time. And if someone encrypts passwords, then they are not using the best practices for password protection. Other options that are in here, we had 6% said a digital signature. A digital signature it's an encrypted hash, if you want to look at it that way, which doesn't help us at all for protecting a password. In fact, it makes it more difficult because for someone to validate the password, they would also need a way to decrypt or verify the signature. It's an extra step that provides absolutely no security from the perspective of a password. We've also got WPA3, which is a wireless encryption mechanism. Again, that's encryption. Encryption's not what we associate with a password. And lastly, EFS, our encrypted file system or encrypting file system in Windows. EFS, also encryption, not what we would use with a password. EFS is there and available. All of this information you can find in the 220.1102 video section 2.4 for password attacks. If you wanted to find out more about passwords, what a hash would look like, how you would reverse engineer it, I have a whole video on that. That's what we would do. That's what's available for you to look through. So that's what I would recommend that you go through. Make sure you're familiar with those. In this case, the answer was indeed B, hash. 69% of you got that one absolutely correct. That is the correct answer, and you got that one. Did a fine job of the details. Let's do another question. See if I can fit in another one before we run out of time. This question asks, the clock on a file server tends to be a few minutes slow after a month of uptime. Which of the following would be the best way to resolve this issue? Would we change the time zone, reboot the server each month, enable time sync, disable all services, or update the BIOS date and time? The clock on a file server tends to be a few minutes slow after a month of uptime. Which of the following would be the best way to resolve this issue? Would we change the time zone, reboot the server each month, enable time sync, disable all services, or update the BIOS date and time? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. That's where we would go. For those of you in the chat room, this is the 1102 A+ study group, the 220-1102. We've been doing 1102 study groups for the last couple of months now. Now we're on our third or fourth. I forget which one of those it happens to be. Some of you are still studying for the 1002. If you are, I have about 3 years of archives. You can go back into the archives and watch any and all of those study groups. So you'll be able to find exactly what you're looking for if you're studying for that particular exam. There is a little bit of overlap because there's maybe 40% of the 1102 is new content. I mean, 60% is probably content that you've seen before in the previous version. So there's a little bit of overlap there, but I would highly recommend you study from materials that match the version of the exam that you're planning to take. Very useful. So if you're studying, if you're taking the 1002, probably shouldn't be watching this video. You should be watching a 1002 study group. So go back in our archives the last 3 years and go have a look at those, because some of the questions you get here will never show up on a 1002 exam. That's why. Some of them will. So there's a little bit of overlap, but you want to study from materials that match. You don't want to study things you don't need to know, and you don't want to miss the things that are important for the exam you're taking. So that's why. If you're just getting started, though, you're in the right place. If you're just getting started, you should be studying the 1101 and 1102 exams. That's because the 1001 and 1002 retire on October the 20th. October the 20th. So it's coming up. That's why we want to deal with this. This is definitely an 1102 question. So this is not a 1002 question. This is a very good example of why you shouldn't watch this if you're studying for the 1002, because this question doesn't apply to you. It's not one of the troubleshooting tasks that's listed in the 1002 set of troubleshooting tasks. It was added to the 1102. There's a lot like that. There's quite a bit of difference between those two, so make sure you're familiar with them. Let's go through this question. It asked, the clock on a file server tends to be a few minutes slow after a month of uptime. Which of the following would be the best way to resolve this issue? Would it be to change the time zone, reboot the server each month, enable time sync, disable all services, or update the BIOS date and time? 77% of you said you would enable time sync, whatever that is. We're going to find out in a moment if that's legitimate or not, or did I just make it up? We have 15% of you that said update the BIOS date and time. Okay. And then we have 7% that said reboot the server each month, 2% said change the time zone, and then 0% said disable all services. Nobody seemed to choose that one. Wouldn't disabling all services solve all of our problems? The machine wouldn't work at all. Maybe that isn't the best idea now that I think about this. This is a challenging problem. If you look at the clock that's on a computer, computers are not really good at keeping time. Computers are very bad at keeping time. They are not designed to be remarkably accurate timekeeping systems. That's not why we created computers. And in fact, the architecture of the motherboards that we use these days almost tend to naturally lose time. They have this time drift. So as the computer is up and running, it gets farther and farther and farther away from an accurate time. So this is a little bit of a challenge. The best thing, if you want to look at it from a practical perspective, what we should do is completely re-engineer every motherboard in the world so that it is properly keeping time, so that we don't have to worry about time drift. Wouldn't that make sense? Well, it would, but it would be awfully expensive. That would add additional complexity to the motherboard and probably make it more expensive, which is not what we would like either. So in this particular case, the way that we fix the problem is the way that your dad always told you, don't do this. We instead fix the symptom, which doesn't actually fix the problem. It just fixes the symptom. But in this particular case, fixing the symptom actually is a pretty good option. It's easy to do. It's fast. You don't have to redesign hardware or motherboards or redesign the way timekeeping works on these motherboards. It's perfect to be able to do it this way. So what we would want to do is make it so that the clock is more accurate. And the way you would do that within Windows is visit Settings, Time and Language, and Date and Time. There's an option in there to configure an automatic time setting. Set the time automatically, and you can turn that on. It's on by default. This will go out to a predefined set of what we call, not making this up, time servers. There are time servers on the internet that do nothing but keep time. That's what they do. There's a service or piece of software running that maintains that particular correct time. So that's why whenever you start getting into the details of this, having some way so that it checks maybe every hour and updates the time, or checks maybe every day and updates the time. It's automatic within the operating system, although you can absolutely go into the details of your registry. You can even modify how often or even which time servers are being accessed through this. So it's a great way to keep this up to date with all of the latest settings. Here's a better view of this time and date. You can see the option here. The current time and date, it will tell you, set the time automatically, yes or no. That's the one we would turn on. Maybe also keep on the adjust for daylight saving time, which you may or may not need depending on where you happen to be in the world, and then what time zone you happen to be using. And you can also change some of the other settings within this as well. Notice the time server that it's using by default is time.windows.com. It even tells you the last time it's synchronized to that particular time server. Now, if we do this often, we do this every hour or do this every day, our system will maintain the proper time. So we'll have a little bit of lag, and then we do a time sync and it goes back to the correct time. And then we have a little bit of lag, and then we do another time sync and it goes back. But the time sync, if you're doing it once a day, you might be losing a quarter of a second, half a second, maybe 1 second, depending on the motherboard that you're using. But this is a very good way to address the problem without actually fixing it. But it effectively fixes it. It's out of sight, out of mind for us, and it maintains the proper date and time on those particular systems. Enabling time sync is the best way of all of these different options to resolve this issue. I'm also going to make a note here on this particular question, because CompTIA does this a lot, is they will ask you questions where multiple answers could be technically correct, that the answer could be a way to resolve this issue, but it isn't the best way to resolve this issue. And this question is a very good example of that. For example, let's go through the other options that we have here. 78% of you said enable time sync option C. That is the correct option for this. We have 14% of you said option E, update the BIOS date and time. Now, the way that you would do that is to reboot your computer, go into the BIOS configuration, choose the option for the clock, set the date, set the time, go. And now it's synchronized. Would that work? Absolutely, that would work. Would work great. But now we have to bring the system down, reboot the system. This is a file server. When are you going to do that? You're going to do that every week? Every day? How often are you going to do that? This file server never should go down. It should always be available. It's a production system. We never want to bring a system down just to change the clock. Really? That's what we're doing? No. So updating the BIOS date and time, would it work? Yes, it would. Is it the best answer? It's not even close to being the best answer. It's a horrible answer because it takes so much time away. First, you have to manually do that. And now the system's down while you're doing it. Not a great option. Not a good one to use. 6% of you say reboot the server each month. Now, if we're assuming that the server is doing some type of synchronization of the clock when it boots up, which may not even necessarily be true, we're sort of guessing in this particular scenario, rebooting the server probably won't even work. But even if it does, even if there was some type of synchronization that takes place when the server boots up, why would we reboot a server, bringing down all of the services on that device, and then finally updating itself? And plus, that's a manual process. unless you automate it. You're going to automate the process of bringing down a production system every day, every week. What's it going to be? Every hour? We'll have to see what that happens to be. So anytime we're bringing a system down, rebooting the server, not the best option given the other options that are available. It's just as bad an option as updating the BIOS date and time, I think. The only difference is you could maybe automate a little bit more of that one. Okay. Changing the date and time does nothing, or changing the time zone does nothing to correct the date and time. It simply changes the offset that will be used to display the time to you, the human eyeball. So changing the time zone has nothing to do with fixing any type of delays with the time. So that's not what we would choose either. And then lastly, disabling all services. Nobody even chose that one. Of course you wouldn't do that. That's an awful idea, and it doesn't have anything to do with the time. So in this case, enabling time sync, answer C, 78% of you got that one absolutely right. That is the correct answer. That's the one you should use. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would be glad to send you an email that provides you with a 1 hour of a webinar category CEU if you follow these instructions. The instructions are, you go to the Professor Messer website, you click on the top or bottom of the website where it says Contact Us. In that Contact Us form, put your name, put your email address, and in the subject line, put September 2011-02, just so I know which one we're dealing with. And then in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code word of the month, time drift. Time drift is our super secret code word of the month. Time drift. Put that in the body of the message. If you'd like to put other things into the body of the message on other lines, you're more than welcome to. But please put it on a line by itself so I can easily see it, easily find it. I've had people write in an entire book inside of the contact, and somewhere hidden in that is probably a super secret code word, but I had no idea because we're paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of content. It's easiest if it's right at the top so I can find it quickly. And then, of course, you can put anything else you'd like because I do have to read through all of them to find your super secret code word, but I also like reading through your comments anyway. So I do eventually read through every single one of those, and that's a good way for you to submit a request for a continuing education unit of a webinar category CEU. So again, go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click Contact Us, put your name, your email address in the subject line, put September 2022, A+ study group or something similar to that, so I know where this came from. And then in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code word of the month, time drift. Time drift, super secret code word of the month. Well, that brings us to well past the top of the hour. For having no questions, we managed to get through an hour of questions. Sometimes that's the way it goes on a live stream, but that's okay. I would love for you to be here for our second hour. Stick around. We're nowhere close to being done yet. Stick around. I'm going to take questions from the chat room. We'll see what questions you happen to have. I'll answer, well, almost anything. Feel free to put them into the chat room. I'll explain how to do that in just a moment. In the meantime, thanks for joining us. We will see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Okay, let's shift over to that. Let's click this button. There we are. Hi, everybody. It's time for the after show. Wow, I managed to get through a set of questions that I barely had available. I know what happened now, looking back, is I was doing all of these questions on a road trip, but then it didn't sync back to Google. Thanks, Google. Thanks for that. One more thing to check in my checklist of things prior to getting into a study group. That's okay. We got everything there. Let's modify while we're sitting here chatting. I'm going to update my lower third information so that I can share with you where you can go to submit questions. I am watching the YouTube chat. So if you're on YouTube right now watching the live stream, I'm looking at that chat. I'm having a look to see what's there. Any questions you have should go into that chat. If you're at professormesser.com/live, you'll notice there's also a chat on that page. That's an embedded version of the YouTube chat, so it's exactly the same chat. So if you're in either of those places, you are ready to go. You can put any question you would like into the chat room. Hopefully, I'll be able to keep these updated as they're sliding by on the screen to be able to see what's there. A lot to go through as we're breaking through and looking at some of these other options that are available. Yeah, there were a couple of other performance-based questions that were in there. We'll just have to wait and see. If you're curious as to what that one was, go back to September of 2021 and watch the replay of that live study group. And that would be a good way to do it. So a few questions are coming in. We can talk about some of these very large-scale concepts with IT, but you're welcome to ask anything that we might have. One of the questions that came through very early on, there are some folks that are getting degrees in cybersecurity, and I see this all the time. And the real question is what that means, because cybersecurity doesn't have a definition. It has 100 definitions. So I'm never sure if having some type of cybersecurity degree means cybersecurity in computer science or cybersecurity in IT, because those are two very different things. For those of you that haven't joined us before, computer science is an area of technology that deals with development, programming, creating applications, or building hardware. And there's a huge emphasis in programming and a huge emphasis in designing and creating from scratch these applications that we use. In IT, we don't do that type of work. We don't do application development. In IT, we don't create hardware and build out BIOS and device drivers. We don't do any of that. IT is about maintaining the data, protecting the systems, keeping all of our services up and running, having a network and security for all of those overarching. So that is where you get into different areas. So let's assume for this particular question that the cybersecurity degree that you're getting happens to be more IT related, because this is a more IT related conversation and certainly more IT related stream. There's very little computer science that you're going to find here. So the question is, should we do Security Plus? You know, is that something we should do to find a job? And I'm going to take this question and expand it out to every certification known to man, just so we can have an approach. Should I get a Microsoft certification? Should I get an Azure cert? Should I get an AWS cert? Should I get a Red Hat cert? Should I get Security Plus? Should I get CASP Plus? Should I get A Plus, Network Plus? All of these questions are perfectly valid, but it's not a question of, what do you think? Should I get Security Plus? Yes or no? That's sort of a question that's in a vacuum. We don't understand any context associated with Security Plus in this particular case. So I would always recommend, if you're in a situation where you're trying to figure out, what do I do next? What other industry certifications are going to help me on my goal to do this thing? Well, that's where you should start. What's your goal? Do you want a job working in IT security? Do you want to maintain firewalls? Do you want to set up VPNs? Do you want to configure SIMs? Do you want to do any of those aspects of security? Work with intrusion prevention, antivirus, cloud-based malware detection, all of those fantastic security technologies in IT. If that's something you want to do, you should go look at what jobs are available in your area for someone that does that. It will probably be a security analyst or a security engineer or a corporate security person. There's different job titles depending on where you happen to go, but they're all basically the same position. Have a look at those job postings to see what they would like you to have. Would they like you to have Security Plus? That might make the decision for you. Maybe they want you to be more Red Hat familiar. Maybe they would like you to get Linux Plus. Maybe they have a list of cloud-based technologies that would be preferred. So it really depends on the person who's hiring to make these decisions. Sometimes it might be nice to get Security Plus, but if no hiring manager is asking for it, is that something you want to spend your time on? So there's a strategy to this. There's kind of a give and take, because you don't want to do what everyone else wants from a list of things. You would like to have some type of autonomy and ways to pursue your own personal interests. But it is a challenge when looking for a job that you find exactly the right credentials that will get someone's attention. And if they say in the job posting, Security Plus certification is required or Security Plus certification is recommended, okay, maybe we'll go get our Security Plus. We'll check that one to go and get that one. If you go through 10 job postings in your area and none of them say Security Plus, maybe we should probably think differently about that then. Maybe we should reconsider what different options we would have. So it really depends on your particular part of the world, the list of what employers would like you to see. I think you'll find that if you live in Washington, D.C. or Maryland or Virginia, that whole area near the federal government, that is one where almost everybody wants you to have Security Plus. But if you go to Texas, you go to Dallas, you may not find the same number of employers asking or requiring that you have Security Plus. So I would highly recommend you go through that list. It's a pretty important one. It's a strategy. You got to come up with a way to be better than anyone else who's applying for that job. And why would you apply for a job with a bunch of things the employer didn't ask you to have? So that's the real question. Other questions from the chat room. Let's have a look at this. I want to mention Brandon in the chat room with the $20 super chat. Thank you, Brandon. Brandon writes, hey, Professor Messer, I was in your last Security Plus study group. I passed the exam that day. Thanks for all your videos, study groups, and practice tests. I finished all 3 A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. Thank you for all you do. Well, Brandon, thank you for your $20 super chat. Congratulations on the Security Plus, which finishes out the trifecta of A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. You've now got a solid foundation you can use to go out and get those IT jobs that are out there. And we're in this weird place right now in the economy where, you know, it's not quite as strong as it was on the job front, but there's still a lot of IT jobs open and a lot of people are hiring for IT. So it is in no way dire at this point. There are a lot of options available out there, and I would highly recommend looking through what might be available in your area. Find that. Thank you, Brandon, for the $20 super chat and for your ongoing support. Congratulations again. So let's Roosevelt in the chat room says, any information for a sales tech? I feel CompTIA can help me get started in that. Is sales tech related to CompTIA in any way? Well, there's different ways to explain that that idea of a technical person who works in a sales-related role. These have traditionally been called systems engineers. Sometimes they are called sales engineers. Sometimes they're called pre-sales engineers to designate them being different than a post-sales engineer. Those are indeed two very different jobs. But let's focus, since my background, a huge part of my IT career was in systems engineering, sales engineering, pre-sales engineering. It's an interesting combination. It's a combination of you needing to be very technically knowledgeable with the products that you represent, because you're usually working for a manufacturer of software or hardware. So you have to be the expert in that software or hardware. And if a customer asks a question, and does it do this? Does it do that? How would we set that up? You have to know. How does it do this? How does it do that? And how would we set it up? And now I have to be the one to set it up. It's a challenging position. Imagine the last position I had like this as a systems engineer was with Palo Alto Networks. Palo Alto Networks firewall, the next generation firewall capabilities from Palo Alto Networks. At the time, we just had the firewall. Of course, Palo Alto Networks now has a huge suite of products. But even just the firewall was an incredibly complex and detailed product. And so it required a lot of training. It required a lot of taking questions from a customer and saying, I don't know, but let me find out and I'll get back to you. The key for systems engineering or pre-sales engineering is balancing the knowledge you have technically with what the problems are that the customer would like to solve. I walked into hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different customers through the years with this Palo Alto Networks firewall, and almost every customer had a different problem they were trying to solve. Obviously, there were nuances here, and sometimes there was quite a bit of overlap, but occasionally you would find, most of the time, you would find different situations that this customer needs this extra little piece, or this customer needs an additional piece of security, or they would like to do it a way that's very different than someone else did. And we would effectively engineer or design what we think that particular firewall would look like. Maybe they would have a single firewall. Maybe it would be redundant firewalls. Maybe the redundant firewalls worked in an active-passive configuration. Maybe it was active-active configurations. So maybe they fit into a layer 3 network. Maybe they were working as a layer 1 device. These firewalls were extremely powerful and complex, so you had to be ready for practically anything. So the first part of this, from a sales engineering perspective, is you need to be very technically knowledgeable in the foundational aspects of that product. And then generally the manufacturer will teach you the rest. They'll train you on what you need to know when you sit down with a customer. The problem with that, the challenges with that, is you need the foundation. So if this is you're just out of college or you're just out of training for technology, a sales position or a systems engineering position probably not going to apply to you quite yet. You need to have a foundation of operating systems and networking and security and other things to layer on top of that. The thing that I find that you add to that, the part of systems engineering that is a little different than what you might expect in most technical roles, is you have to be able to now explain to people what the value of this technology really is. And not that, hey, this is pretty, don't you want one of these? That doesn't work. You have to, there's a whole process of listening to what the problems are from the customer. So you usually sit down in a meeting saying, all right, what are the things you're trying to do here? What are the problems you're trying to solve? Well, we've got this problem with this app, or we've got this issue with data that's coming into our systems, or we have no visibility into this type of issue. Okay, well, here's how, if I was you, here's how I would set up this product to solve those problems. And then we go into a conversation about how this particular product is the best thing in the world and how can you live without it, because it fixes all of these problems you said you needed to have fixed. And hopefully then you hand it over to the salesperson and everybody fights about how much it costs. And then finally the customer purchases. That's the cycle. That's a very collapsed version of the cycle, but that's how it works. Is that ultimately you need to understand what the problems are the customer is trying to solve. You need to present a technical solution for that customer. And then lastly, you need to find a way to implement that in a way that fits into the customer's network. That is the key to systems engineering. That is what's interesting about that position is it's one of someone who's very mobile. You're often visiting the customers. So I got to have, at one point, the entire East Coast was my territory with Palo Alto Networks. There have been times where I've had the world as my territory. So there was a lot of international travel. But for my Palo Alto Networks, it started off as the East Coast and then slowly got down into the Southeast U.S. And I think ultimately I finished up just in Florida as the company began to grow and grow and grow. And they brought in more systems engineers and more salespeople, and you could kind of distribute that out into different areas. That's a very common way to approach systems engineering, but it does require you have some expertise. It's a fun job. It pays very well as long as you're doing your job and you're able to sell. You have a quota and you have to make a certain amount. Usually systems engineering, you are paid about a 75 or 80% base salary, and then you get a bonus. You're expected to make up the 20 to 25% in bonuses or commissions associated with the sales that you do. And if you do more than that and you go above 100%, then you could even make even more money. Sometimes there's even multipliers associated with that where you make even more of a bonus. So they try to drive you towards really getting all of these products sold. Ultimately, that is what you're trying to do. Now, if you're someone you're not comfortable talking to people, you're not happy standing in front of a group of 100 people and giving a presentation, or it's something where you're just not good designing or figuring out on the fly how you would design or implement a particular solution, then systems engineering may not be the perfect job for you right now. But all of those things can be learned. Those are all skills that you can train and become better at. I didn't speak very well when I started as a systems engineer. There's a whole set of strategies and training and repetition and learning a lot of these skills that have nothing to do with technology and everything to do with how you would communicate with another person. In many ways, this live stream is a result of those many years that were spent as a systems engineer, because I learned to talk to other people sort of in the eyes and say, here's the situation, and then be able to take a complex idea, break it down into individual, easy to understand components, and then explain how that particular technology might work. So I love doing systems engineering, or I wouldn't have done it. I think probably about 20 years of my career, maybe a little more, was as a systems engineer. Really enjoyed it, met the greatest people. My customers are just fantastic technologists. You got to see a lot of the country, or in my case, a lot of the world even, because I got to go to London and Germany and Australia and Bangkok and Japan and Korea. And there's all these places all around the world. I got to go into nuclear power plants and breweries and train systems, train management and airlines and just anything you can think of. You're in some of the biggest companies in the world. They might make soda pop, or they might be a retailer. It's always different, always unique. There was always different challenges. And if you're looking for a challenge every day, that's systems engineering for you. Is it a tough job? Absolutely. Can it be arduous? It can at times. Yes, it can. But it ultimately has a great upside. You're constantly learning technology, constantly. You are also constantly being asked questions to which you do not know the answer. So that can be good or bad for some people. But very often I'd be in a meeting and they'd ask a question, I'd know the answer. They'd ask another question, I'd know the answer. And then they ask some question I've never heard before. I'm like, I don't know, brother, but I will find out. I know someone who knows the answer to that, and we'll get the answer back to you. I'll send you an email once we're done here. That's just the normal thing. And then once I connect in with my associates who do know the answer, they explain it to me, and now I've learned something. And now I can get back to my customer, and if anybody else ever asks that question, I now know the answer to it. That's the part I think all of us in IT love, the idea of a problem and solving the problem. It's a puzzle. Every day we have a puzzle to solve. And I think that's what drives us in a lot of ways into the world of information technology. Now, I want to go back to a question, and this is unfortunately relatively common with some companies. Other companies are really good at avoiding this problem. But Paul in the chat room says, a lot of job postings I've seen are conflating computer science and IT. They're asking for a bachelor's in computer science and then A+ Network Plus certs. What's up with that? Paul, you're absolutely right. What is up with that? It's probably a combination of a number of different things. First thing you'll notice if you go to a 4-year college or university, that many of them don't have an IT program. They simply do not. They have a computer science program, and to them, it's the same thing, even though it clearly is not. It's not even close. Universities are, how can I say this nicely? I will say it as nicely as I can. Universities are very good at what they call, in fact, what they have said publicly is, we're a university, we teach, we do not train. I think they're splitting hairs just a little bit when it gets into that. So what you'll find is universities will teach you about programming and arrays and memory management and C++ and a lot of things that in IT we never touch. Never need to know it, don't care to know it, not interested in knowing it. But the universities, they think that's technology. If you recall back, there were this goes back a number of years at this point, but there was an emphasis from the US federal government that every child should learn to code. And they really pushed really hard. Everyone should learn to code. Everybody should learn to code. Except in IT, we don't code. We don't do that. We don't build applications. There are, of course, there's a nuance there, isn't there? Because there are things that you do need to know in IT to be able to automate. And I really call that scripting. That's not programming. It's not coding. It's scripting. And knowing how to script is incredibly important in IT. Knowing PowerShell, knowing batch files, knowing how to do a shell script, knowing how to manipulate even Perl to some degree, and certainly Python those are the two things. If you had to pick two, grab Python, grab PowerShell, learn either one or both of those. That's what you need to know in IT. But we're not building applications. We're not creating complex arrays and storing it in SQL-based databases. We're not doing any of those things. That's for programmers to do. That's for developers to do. That's for computer science to do. I mentioned this in the last study group. I was looking at a state university here in Florida, and they had an IT program. I thought, well, this is good because I have one more child, my son. He's got his AA. Now he's ready to get that 4-year degree. And I said, well, let's look at maybe an IT degree. Maybe there's a local Florida school that has an IT degree program. And in fact, there was. They had information technology. I'm reading through it. They teach you about networking and operating systems. I thought, this is great. Finally, a university has come to their senses, and they will teach you things that are actually valuable for you to know in IT that you can use right out of the gate as soon as you get your degree. And then I kept reading, and they want you to take a year's worth of physics. What? Huh? What? Hold on. I've checked my notes. I've gone through the details, and I realized, wait a second, my course notes for this course have no mention in here of physics or chemistry or any type of higher math. And that's because in IT, we don't deal with physics. We don't deal with chemistry. We don't deal with higher math. That's computer science. What it does is put up barriers. It creates a way to prevent people from getting a degree in IT because physics is very different than operating systems, networking, and security. It makes no sense. In fact, chat room's even going, what? What are you talking about? There's no IT cert for physics. No, that's correct. There are no IT certs for physics, but these universities don't know any better. Or they do. It's just as bad either way. Either they don't know any better and they think they should be adding some type of higher science program into information technology, thinking that it has something to do with physics, chemistry, or higher math. Or, which is just as bad, they do it to put up a barrier, to get rid of people, to prevent people from getting an IT degree. Both of those are bad. Both of those are ridiculous. So we didn't pursue that particular university. So not getting my money, in other words. Not going to do it. And that's unfortunately, as I go from university to university to university, it tends to be a common story. So if you're part of the university system and you are creating these programs for information technology, stop doing that. Stop it. Stop putting physics in there. I got a degree in business management when I went to school. I had to take all kinds of different weird math classes to get a business management degree. So that's statistics I can almost understand. Statistics is a good one for business. But then they shifted gears and put me in a higher math. You had to have a higher math class to get a degree in business, which made no sense either. And I've never used those skills ever in my life because we don't use them. It's almost like nothing has changed in that amount of time, which has been about, since I went to college, like in 150 years, nothing has changed. So the business calc class was pretty stupid that I took. Have I ever used calculus ever in business? No. Does business use calculus? It does not. Would there ever be a time in business where the skills you learned in your calculus would come and be used? No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't. This is why we're pointing at you, colleges, and laughing. This is why we're pointing at you, universities, and we're laughing at you. This is why in the industry we start to see people saying, "Is college really that important? This seems a little messed up." And that's exactly where they get it from. Now, was accounting important? Yes, it was. Was statistics important? Actually, yeah. Stats was a good one. Business calculus, what are you thinking? They're not. They quite simply are not thinking. And that's the problem that we run into, is those situations where why would a university blend together topics that have nothing to do with the degree that you're going after? I don't know, but they do it. Do not know. Okay. Let's see what other options we have here. Other questions have come in. I want to thank I Ride Dirt in the chat room with the $5 super chat. I Ride Dirt, or maybe One Ride Dirt, says, Professor, thanks to you, passed my 1002. Thank you. Well, congratulations on the 1002. Hopefully that's your second one in the list of things that you needed to be able to get done by October the 20th. That's the important part, is getting the 1001 and 1002 all done by the time October 20th comes along. We do this every time there's an update, every time there's a retirement. People will be working towards finishing both of those certifications by October 20th. It is completely normal. And if it's part of your strategy to get it done by October 20th, that's perfectly fine. But you just have to make sure you get both of them done by then. So congratulations, I Ride Dirt, on that 1002. Hopefully that gets your A+, and you're locked in. So congratulations on that. And thank you also for the super chat as well. We really do appreciate it. Other questions coming in. Let's see what else we have here. Professor Messer, if I'm still young and just getting into IT with no experience, should I be focusing on the certs, or should I try to get a 2-year degree first, or what? What should we be doing with that? This is an involved question, to the point that I lay out everything for learning or gathering together what you need to know or things you need to have to get a job in IT with no experience. And if you look in the YouTube video description of this video, there is a link to a video I made of how to get a job in IT with no experience. And it's a 30-minute video. And I realize on YouTube, that's like a huge video. That's an enormously long video for YouTube. But I could not make it any shorter. It is so chock full of information that it's 30 minutes long. And I would highly recommend you look through that video, because it's never just one thing. You need a formal education, you need industry certifications, you need some practical experience, and you need to know someone who works there. 4 things. Those 4. Those 4 are big ones. Sometimes you can get away with 3 or 2, but you probably want those 3 or 2 to be even bigger so that you can compensate for not having one of those. So I would recommend you look through that video. It might give you some ideas of things you can do. And I think that's a great place to start, is that video, because I go through each one of those elements: formal education, industry certification, some practical knowledge. Doesn't have to be professional knowledge, but does need to be practical. And you know someone who works there. That last one's a good one. But I explain the advantages and disadvantages of each one of those. So I would really recommend, if you're in IT or you're thinking of getting into IT and you don't have any type of experience, you're wondering, is this just going to work with a cert? Have a look at that video, How to Get a Job in IT with No Experience, and that will break it down for you very, very easily. Let's look at some more questions that have come through. Hi, Professor. I'm really confused. How much and what should I study to get A+ certified? Well, the first place I would recommend going is the very first video of any of my training courses, which is how to earn your A+ certification. And you want to use the one that's specific. If you're just getting started, it'd be the 1101 or 1102. That very first video of the course kind of lays out what A+ is, how people use this certification, how employers use this certification, and what you should be using as study materials to earn the certification. That's probably the best place I can recommend you go, because it sort of lays everything out. If I take all the frequently asked questions I get through the years and they go into that video. So anytime somebody has one of those, and that is one of the most frequently asked questions I get, is what should I study? Is I just watch the first video. It will answer all of your questions, or 99% of those questions. And then if you still have questions after that, let me know. But that pretty much, I try to cover everything in that video to be able to break down what that happens to be. Can I take the 1101 and 1102 after studying the 1001 or 1002? Well, you can, but you're probably going to fail. There you go. You're probably not going to do well. You would certainly not do as well as if you had studied for the proper exam. Let me explain why. I'm going to pop something up on my screen here. We're going to break this down for you. Let's look at real numbers. There's nothing. Somebody tried to argue with me the other day about the numbers. Like, well, you have the numbers, but those are just numbers. That's not really telling me about what's happening. Like, no, that's exactly telling you what's happening. So let's go through A+ statistics. This is why we take the statistics course right there. So if we look at, let's look at the 1101 and 1102 exams. Let's break them down. So I created a spreadsheet that has every exam objective. And then I pulled through a list of the ones that were new and the ones that were in a previous version. You can, in fact, I'm going to scroll back up here. See all the yellow over here in this first column? Everything that's yellow is new. So if you studied older materials, you'd miss all that content. Well, how much content is that? Well, I'm glad you asked. On the 1101 exam, there are 392 exam objectives there, so almost 400. This, by the way, is a decrease from the previous version. The 1001 was just over 565 objectives. So they reduced the number of things you have to memorize in this latest version of the exam, primarily because you complained and said, there's too much to memorize here. And CompTIA said, maybe we can make this easier for you. Let's focus on the things that are important and get rid of things that maybe you don't need to know. So they reduced the number of things you have to know. However, 110 of those objectives are brand new. So if you studied from older materials, you would be learning things that were dropped that are no longer part of the exam, and you would miss all of the new stuff that was added, which, by the way, is a quarter, really 28% of the exam. Almost a third of the exam, or close to it, certainly a quarter of the exam is brand new. So think of it from a scale from 1 to 100%. If you studied from older books, the best you could ever do on this exam is a 75%. That's not good. That's horrible. So that's why I always tell people, study from materials that match. Let's do the same thing for the 1102. So the 1102, again, lots of yellow. In fact, lots of yellow. If we go all the way to the bottom, interestingly, the 1002 was 570 objectives. The 1102, 580. So practically the same size of certification. Lot of that is the same size. But you'll notice 210 of the objectives are new, which means 36% of the exam are things that are not found in your older books. They're just not in there. They don't exist in the older books. The best you could do on this exam, if you studied from older books, is about a 65%. That's a fail, probably. So that's why 36%, that's why I tell people don't study from old books. Don't use those old books thinking you can walk into a new exam. I mean, you can, but you're probably not going to do very well. You're already putting yourself at a disadvantage. Why would you do that? Books are relatively inexpensive. There's obviously a cost associated with it, and I'm absolutely sensitive to that. But in the big scheme of things, the books are relatively inexpensive. You should make sure you get the latest books. So that's where that comes from. Can I share this spreadsheet? I just did. That was it. That was you seeing it, was the sharing of it. It's something you can easily create, though. You just write down the exam objectives and compare it to the older versions. So that's why. And that's why I so strongly recommend that you always study from the latest, or study from the set of exam materials that match the exam that you're taking. Just make sure they match. That's all I'm asking. Now, I think we'll leave that one right there. Unfortunately, and some of the things that you will find is that some training materials sort of blend these two together. I don't know why they do this, but they'll create an 1101 and 1102 book, but still keep the older 1002 content in it that has already been dropped from the exam. That I don't understand at all, that people are doing that. And when you talk to those organizations that do that, here's the nonsense that they give you. They say, oh, well, look at the objectives. This is why we did it. In fact, there is a note in the objectives that states the lists of examples provided in bulleted format are not exhaustive lists. Other examples of technologies, processes, or tasks pertaining to each objective may also be included on the exam, although not listed or covered in this objectives document. They use that paragraph as a justification for creating content that has nothing to do with the exam that you're planning to take. But they like that it's bigger. They like that they were able to put more, it has more content. So therefore it looks like it's better. It is not. This statement is there really more for legal reasons. In practical terms, this list of examples effectively is an exhaustive list. CompTIA rarely goes outside the scope of the exam objectives. And perhaps more importantly, if you know everything that's in the objectives, you're going to pass just fine. So don't study things that are outside the scope of the exam. It doesn't make sense. Even when people try to convince you, they will, it's not a lie. It's sort of a lie. They're lying to you and telling you, no, you need to have a broader perspective of all of these things that aren't specifically listed in the exam objectives. But they don't. Not for the exam. Will you need it in the world? Will you need it for your job? Maybe. Perhaps, sure. But that's not what we're doing here. We're trying to pass a certification exam. Why would you spend time studying something that will never appear on the exam? I don't know why either, but they do. So don't let poorly written books, poorly written practice exams, or poorly written third-party training materials change your perspective of reality. That's my best thing I can take to you. Go to the objectives, stick with the objectives, Do not deviate from the objectives. Learn everything that's on the objectives, and you're going to pass the exam. That's it. That's the formula. Spending time or wasting time learning other things makes no sense whatsoever from the perspective of someone trying to earn a certification. So don't do that. I want to thank Brandon in the chat room with the 1,000. He says 1,001, 1,002, and now 601 passed thanks to your videos. Completing Network Plus in a couple of weeks using your videos and notes. Thanks for everything you do. Thank you, Brandon, for the $9.99 super chat, and congratulations on getting that getting that A plus done before it retires. Yes. Getting 601, that's your Security Plus. Fantastic. And as I've always said, Network Plus ties it all together. Network Plus is the glue of IT. Networking, everything touches the network. The cloud touches the network. Your servers touch the network. You touch the network. Everybody touches the network. The more you know about the network, the more you'll know about everything else in IT. So congratulations on your certs. Keep working on that Network Plus. That's a good one to know. And keep going through all of those. That's fantastic. Also, thank you again for your $9.99 super chat and your ongoing support. Obviously, you've been watching our videos and going through the training courses and learning all of this content. That helps us as well, and we appreciate your support for doing all of those. If you have a question, follow the link that's on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/live or put your question into the YouTube video chat, the one that we're going back and forth with right now. We'll be glad to have a look at those questions, such as the one from Tiblock that says, does Linux come into play for IT? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. If you follow what we do when I'm not live, I often will complain about Linux. Linux has an interesting history. The people of Linux have an interesting history. The originators of Linux have an interesting history. It is one that is undeniably taken the world of technology by storm. If you're on professormesser.com right now, you're on a series of different Linux servers. So it's a good example. I use Linux, I use Mac OS, I use Windows. I use everything. I use iPad OS, I use iOS. Got a little bit of Android here and there. But knowing Linux is yet another operating system that you need to put into your list of things that you know. If you're planning to do anything in IT, the more knowledge you have of Windows, Linux, and Mac OS will serve you very well. I'll go back to my job as a systems engineer, where you're walking into a customer and you'll know what you're going to find. They might be a company that has 99% Mac OS, and they're going to ask questions. Does your VPN work well with this with Mac OS? And you can say yes or no, because you've installed it in Mac OS. You're familiar with Mac OS. You've used it. Maybe the device you use day to day is a Mac OS device. Or maybe they ask, does this run on Linux? Well, now you need to understand what questions to ask. What distribution of Linux? What kernel of Linux? What system are you running that is using Linux? Because there is no Linux. There's really a number of different flavors of Linux. So that's why I often tell people that's what you want to do, is find those operating systems, learn everything you can about those operating systems, and that will create the foundation that you can then layer the networking piece on top of, and then layer on the security piece on top of that. You know, the more you know about how Linux deals with security and Mac OS deals with security, the better off you're going to be able to secure those operating systems. Just makes sense. So learn everything you can about those. In fact, you'll often find some manufacturers and employers might look for people that know a specific operating system. So you could be a Linux system administrator, and all you do all day, every day is work with Linux systems. There are jobs like that in the world. Sometimes it's a combination, like the one I had, where I had to understand Windows, Mac OS, and Linux to be able to do my job, to be able to answer questions, to be able to design, implement, and make these very complex systems work properly. So pretty useful and pretty important to know. Let's see. Other questions in the chat room. I'm going to scroll up a bit. Other people mentioning you've run into these situations where a third party will add on to older material to make it look bigger. I don't know why they do that. I don't know either, but they do. Again, don't let someone else's misguided set of objectives somehow change your perspective of reality. That's, a bad book is a bad book. A bad practice exam is a bad practice exam. There's no other way to do that. That's why if you look at my course notes, if you look at my practice exams, I just released the practice exam for the 1102 and the 1101, and the 1102 is being worked on right now. I completely rewrite them every time. I go through and make sure that every question, even if I don't rewrite the entire question, I make sure that every part of the question applies to the current version of exam objectives, because some topics were removed, some topics were added. Those need to be represented properly in the practice exams. Not everyone, for some reason, not everyone does that. I don't know why. It just makes for better practice exams. It makes for better content. It allows you to learn better. And that's our focus. I need to make the best possible training materials that you could find anywhere for any price. That's what we're trying to do. Other questions. Brute in the chat room. Hey, Professor, I passed my Core 1 A+. Just passed my Core 1 A+. Wanted to swing by, say thanks for the help. At the moment, watching videos for Core 2. Now, I'm curious, Brute, did you take the 1001 or did you take the 1101? Because obviously that will change your strategy for the Core 2 part of the exam. Pretty important. Also, Keith in the chat room says, I just passed Network Plus an hour ago using the Professor Messer course notes. Great. Congratulations. Thank you for your support. Thanks, Professor. I just ordered Security Plus notes. Be getting prepared for that one next. I didn't even talk about my course notes. Got them right here. It was such a sort of a scrambled study group. These course notes list everything that's in my videos. All the text, all the graphics, all of the important charts, they are in there. I've got plenty to pull from. If you're someone who's working on course notes and you're trying to sort of consolidate everything, I realize that the exams themselves have 137 videos in them. That's a lot of videos. You may want to grab a couple of these course notes to help you study. You can find out more about this at professormesser.com/1102notes. Be able to find those. And hopefully over the coming weeks, you'll see the practice exams will appear. We're already working on those. We're already going through them. We're already making sure and editing everything that's in there. They're coming along great. I love the 1101 practice exams that we just released. They're really good. Probably some of the best A+ practice exams I've created. I like every time they get better and better, it seems. And we'll do the same thing for the 1102. So if you're looking for 1102 practice exams eventually, it'll be a few weeks to get those to you. But in the coming weeks, you'll see that book will be released as well. These take time. You do have to do that. Here's a bit of a logistical problem. Max in the chat room asks, do you know a way to get your hands on Mac OS without buying a physical Mac? This is a bit of a problem because Mac OS, the end user license agreement for Mac OS requires you to run it on Apple hardware. If you run Mac OS on something that isn't Apple hardware, you are in violation of the end user licensing agreement, and I never recommend doing that. So you could do this as a virtual machine, but it would have to be in a virtual machine running on Apple hardware. And if you've already got Apple hardware, you're already running Mac OS, so why would you run it as a virtual machine? So that's what I mean. And in the chat room, I do not recommend running this in ways that would not run on Apple hardware, because that would be a violation of the end user license agreement. That would be illegal. Don't do that. There are some good choices though. Well, first, let me back up. First, you do not need to have hands-on Mac OS to pass your A+ exam. All of the things that are in my videos where I describe those different pieces of it. Everything that I go through with the different utilities, the front end of Mac OS, and even using the front end and showing you some of those features, those absolutely are things you should know for your exam, but you could pretty much get a knowledge of all of those without having to get any type of hands-on. I just don't think it's incredibly necessary to make that happen. However, there are a number of macOS cloud-based implementations that you can run. There are hosting services. Mac in Cloud is one that I've tried. Mac Stadium, I've also tried that one before. These are services that give you access to macOS with hands-on, but it's all just running in the cloud. And that is a very, that's a reasonable way. If you really, 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 really wanted hands-on, you could do that. The challenge, of course, is there's money associated with this. Just for a month of this, this Mac Stadium starts at $132 a month. Mac in Cloud, let's see what their pricing is like these days. I haven't checked in with them in quite some time. So you can do a pay-as-you-go for $4 a day. They do have a monthly commitment there. So it's really, they say it's $4, but you have to pay a month's worth. And that may be too much. So, but there are options if you have to do it. By the way, AWS has recently added macOS into their desktop as a service offering. So you can do it on Amazon as well. They're all about the same price. macOS it's difficult. But as I told you, you don't have to get hands-on to pass your A+ exam. Not incredibly important for this. But there's some options there. And if you are someone who just have to have it, there's a couple ways to do it. You may be able to find a piece of older Mac OS hardware out there. You may be able to go to a local Goodwill or some other type of thrift store, and they might have an older Mac OS device. The things that are in previous versions of Mac OS are very similar to what's on the current shipping version of Mac OS. So even if it's an older version of hardware, it can't be upgraded to the latest version of Mac OS. You're still going to get everything you need to know to do hands-on, and it might cost you less than $100 to do that. So there might be some options out there for that one. It's tough because Apple hardware tends to hold its price. It tends to be relatively expensive as the years go on. David in the chat room has a similar idea. Go look on eBay. You might be able to find some older Mac OS hardware or Apple hardware that you could use to run Mac OS. So it might be an option there too. Let's see. Other folks in the chat have some other questions there. I'm currently in school to obtain an intro to cybersecurity certification. Again, whatever that is. Studying for A+ and learning from TryHackMe. The hacking websites have become very popular as of late, where they give you these challenges and you have to learn how to hack through those challenges. Generally speaking, we don't do a lot of that in IT. I get that the term cybersecurity, it's sexy. IT security in general is sexy. It's a fun job working in IT security. But we don't tend to do hands-on hacking of things or even need to know how the hands-on hacking of things works. So I think that the TryHackMe for computer science may apply more towards the computer science side than it applies to IT. However, once you get into more advanced IT scenarios where maybe you'd like to upgrade or move into penetration testing, it really does help if you understand vulnerabilities, exploits, and how to manipulate or take advantage of those in an operating system. So that is a great skill, but doesn't have much applicability to an entry-level IT position. Working at a help desk, you're not going to be hacking into systems. You're going to be resetting passwords. You're going to be working with users because their mouse doesn't work. It is the beginnings of your IT career. Almost everybody starts in the help desk. I started in a field service role. I started below the help desk. I started as a field service engineer and then moved up into the help desk. That's how low I started on the list of things. So I always recommend that folks, that you get some of that more technical skills with operating systems and more skills when working with people, either in person or on the phone. It's interesting that the skills that are people skills are the ones that tend to move you further in your career, because unfortunately there's a bit of a dearth. There's a limited number of people who have spent the time to learn the skills on how to evaluate a situation and then communicate to other people in a way that is straightforward, easy to understand, and gives them the information that they were looking to get. So if you're just out of school, and regardless of what certification you got or regardless of what career type degree you got, whether it's cybersecurity or IT or computer science or whatever it happens to be, try to pull in skills on how to talk to people. And there's lots of great YouTube videos on this. I went to a formal training program. My employer felt that it was so important for me to be able to communicate that they sent me to a class. This one happened to be from an organization called Decker. And it showed you, they would record you speaking, and then they would watch the recording and say, see that, see this, do this, not that. And they would point this out, because when you're talking to people, you don't see yourself generally. I do now because everything's recorded, but you don't generally see that. So what do you do with your hands? Do you put them here? Hi, everybody. You ever see someone, they just clasp their hands the whole time in front of them, like somebody's ready to throw a fastball at them? I'm not sure what's going on there. Like they're setting a pick, and they're just straight up, hello, thank you for joining us. And they are just as stiff. They sound just as stiff as they are. Hello, I am here to explain to you the benefits of using a next generation firewall. This is why the employer wanted us to get this training. And you learn these interesting skills, like what to do with your hands, things you would never think about. The answer to that question, by the way, is just put them at your side. Put them straight at your side and leave them there and talk. And if you do that, just try that. Stand in front of a mirror, put your hands at your side, and talk to somebody. Tell the mirror what you had for breakfast. Tell the mirror the last vacation you went on. And you'll find it's very awkward the first couple times because your hands are just at your side. And you're thinking, this must look really stupid. And they record this, and then they showed it back with us standing there with our hands at our side. Like, that looks perfectly normal. And it's one of those things you wouldn't ever think about had you been to a training class that took these little nuggets of skills and brought them all together so that you could be better at communicating with people. It's ironic, isn't it, that we spend so much time talking about bits and bytes and throughput and internet bandwidth and VPN encryption and configuring authentication mechanisms and encryption technologies. We do spend all this time on the technology, but we often forget that perhaps the more important skill is being able to talk to other people about this technology. I will say, I mentioned earlier that I've really been around the world talking to people about technology. The job that I had that took me around the world was literally one where I did nothing but talk to people in usually in small or even large crowds. So I would fly to Chicago to a trade show and present in front of 100 people. Then I would fly to Dallas and have a meeting with a customer and in a room full of 10 people. And then I would fly to London and to another trade show where I would present in front of 50 people. So it's interesting that at some point I was always expecting, should I be configuring a server? Should I be setting up some type of technical thing in the background? No, my job was to fly to that place, stand in front of those people, tell them the story that I had, and then put all my stuff in a bag and go to the airport and do it again. That was a real job. They paid me a lot of money to do that. Now, there were other things in there about I had to create press releases and I communicated with analysts, and there were all kinds of different things involved with that. Some of it was being on the phone a lot. Some of it was presenting in front of people. But it was the communication skills that gave me the flexibility to get that job and effectively see the world. Ironically, it's one of those, and what I found, it was great to do for about a year, but then I found I really like doing the techie stuff more. You know, seeing the world is great, and I got to meet tons of fantastic people, and it was a great job to have, fantastic job to have. But I like doing the bits and bytes stuff. I like having a problem and solving the problem. I think a lot of us in IT are like that. We love to take a situation where something isn't quite right and resolve it. If you've seen people that they love crosswords, or they love the find a word, or they love the cryptic crossword, or they love whatever it is. They're solving problems. They're fixing the puzzles. You see this in computer gaming, where it's a problem to solve and then you have to solve it. Similar in IT. You're presented with a problem. You have to figure out the best way to solve it. And I found that that's really where I enjoyed the most. And I eventually left that job traveling the world to take another job as a systems engineer with Palo Alto Networks, and I'm glad I did, because I was able to get in very early and really learn quite a bit about the technology from there. Imagine having a job where you're learning about a technology that nobody knows about yet. Now today we talk about next generation firewalls like they're French fries. Like that's a perfectly normal thing we have in the world, is a next generation firewall. Imagine showing up at a customer site where no one has ever heard of a next generation firewall before. And then when you explain to them what a next generation firewall is, they don't believe you. That was the first year of my job at Palo Alto Networks, was just convincing people that this brand new technology existed and worked. And not only did it exist, it worked extremely well, blew everybody else right out of the gate. Nobody else even today can really touch their technology. And I got to throw out a lot of old firewalls and put in new fancy stuff. And that was just a blast. Just that is about as geeky techie as any job I ever had. Probably next to working at Network General and working at the packet level. That Palo Alto Networks job was just a blast and a lot of fun. And it was a good way to learn technology. Because it was so broad, you were constantly learning. That's another thing you're going to have to think about if you're getting into IT and you're thinking, well, I got my degree and I got my A+ cert and Network Plus and Security Plus. I guess I'm done now, right? Oh, no, you're just getting started. There is an entire world of things you don't know yet. And you will constantly be keeping up to date with the latest technologies. It's not like it's very difficult to make that happen, but you'll still be reading, you'll still be updating yourself, you'll still be watching videos for the rest of your career, because there's always something new to learn. And by the time you've even learned the important things in your career, now new technology shows up. Now suddenly there's a next generation firewall. What is that? How does that work? How do we implement it? Those types of things. Incredibly important. In the chat room, Luke says, got my A+ finally. Thanks, Professor Messer. Well, congratulations, Luke, on your A+ cert. It is one that's really your jumping off point in IT. I love it when people get their A+ certification. Not only is it interesting that we have the cert there, because we need it to get a job. We often think A+ cert, we're doing this because people want us to have it so we can get a job and we can get that salary. The interesting point about the A+, though, is even if you did not get that certification so that you could get a job, or here's something, people have emailed me about this, they never take the exams. They go through everything that's in the A+ exam objectives. They watch all the videos. They do all the hands-on. They learn about these technologies dealing with Windows and networking and security and everything that's in there. But they're doing it so they understand the technology. They're doing it so they can have a conversation with other people who deal with this type of technology and communicate with them intelligently. That's another part we often forget, is that when we finish with the cert, we're smarter now. We know more than when we started. In some cases, we know a lot more than when we started this process. And that is another part of IT that I really enjoy, is this learning process where you really get detailed learning. I've probably earned 20 different certifications, or I've passed about 20 different certification exams in my career. That doesn't mean I have 20 certs, but some of them, like Microsoft, you had to take 6 exams. You had to pass all 6 of those exams to earn a Microsoft certification. But that's a really good example of constantly learning and really getting into the details of these topics. And when you're done, you now know a lot more than when you stopped. I got my Microsoft MCSE, the Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer. I got that a long time ago, back in the day, as they say, a very long time ago. But when I learned everything I needed for that MCSE, I learned about Active Directory. I learned about the way Windows does networking. I learned about the security built into NTFS. I learned about the built-in capabilities for services in Windows. All of those things I learned effectively still exist in Windows. And as I went through my career, and I would need to set up a VPN in Windows and it wouldn't work, and I would know instantly, oh, we needed to run that as an administrator. That's why it failed. And we run it as an admin and everything would work. But had I not gone through that Microsoft certification system program and get my MCSE, I would not have known that necessarily. I would have had to pick it up somewhere else, I guess. But I already knew it. So even though I was not a Microsoft Windows system administrator, I was not doing anything relating to Windows as a job, but some things in my job, like configuring VPNs and installing VPN software, required a knowledge of the operating system. I already had the knowledge. So sometimes these skills we learn, the things that you learn in A+, 20 years from now, you're going to pull out of that. You're going to pull open a machine that's having a problem, and you're going to see an IP address, and you'll know immediately, oh, I know exactly why that's there. Our DHCP server is having a problem, or I'm not communicating to it. But you learned that 20 years ago when you took your A+. That's the value of these certifications. So pretty important. In the chat room, I'll answer this more of a programming type, or not programming. I say programming, more of a broadcast problem. Professor jumped in your channel accidentally. Could not find Security SY0-401 playlist, but listed only individual videos. Yeah, the 401 was retired, I don't know, 8 years ago, 6 years ago, long time ago. So do not be don't watch your SY0-401 playlist. It is a very different certification than anything else. The latest Security Plus is the SY0-601. That's the one you need to watch. Of course, all of my videos and even the archive of all of my videos is on YouTube. So you can go back, way back. You can go back to the 600 series of A+ if you wanted to, and watch all of my 600. Don't do that. Don't watch the old videos, please. Don't do that. The content's pretty much the same, except it's older technology. But if you're interested in Security Plus, look for my playlist on YouTube for the SY0-601. That's the one you want to take. So that'll hopefully get you moving in the right direction. Anything that says 501 or 401 or 301, don't watch those. Those are the old ones. They don't apply to the latest exam. They're not going to help you very much unless there's something you're really, really looking for. Well, that brings us to the end of another hour. Thank you for being here for our QA today. Thanks for joining us in the first hour, where we always go through Q&A. I'm so glad we had questions to give you today. We'll make sure that doesn't happen again. And of course, in the second hour, I love getting your questions in the chat room. Of course, we're always around. Once the stream is over, We're always hanging out in Discord and talking about something. You can visit us at professormesser.com/Discord. If you'd like to join us later in the month, we're doing a Network Plus and a Security Plus study group. You can find it on our calendar. Our event calendar is at professormesser.com/calendar. You can also find it on Discord if you're part of our Discord group already. There's an events channel, and I always update the dates for all of our events in that channel as well. Thanks for joining us. So nice to have you here. We love doing these live streams, and we couldn't do it without you. You're a big part of that. So thanks for everything, for your time, and for being here. If you like this video, we'd love it if you would give it a thumbs up. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Thanks, everybody.